Hello there, and welcome back to Jections. Okay, that's my best Andrew impersonation. Hey everyone, welcome back. Unfortunately, Andrew is not in today, but we have a like-for-like American replacement of equal, some would say, superior quality. Sterling, please introduce yourself.
All right, yeah. So, no, thanks for having me on, guys. My name is Sterling. Obviously, I'm a forum contributor as well, and have been a Inter fan since about 2007. Became an Inter fan from actually playing video games. Used to play the FIFA game back in the day when Inter had Adriano and Ibrahimovic, and I was a terrible video game player, but even I could spam crosses into the boxes. And I've always actually loved the colors of black and blue. And then obviously started watching games, and then Inter at that time was also really good, so that made it kind of easy to like the team. And they had Mourinho, and things were really exciting back then. And then I went through the banter era and never left. So now I'm officially a lifer, and really enjoy watching Inter, and happy to be here today with you guys.
Irfan, Miko, how you guys been?
Good. It's tough, I think, for any Inter fan to not be pretty happy and excited right now. Great performance yesterday, and all's good on this end. What about you, Miko?
Yeah, what can I say? Couldn't be happier at this point.
Okay, so in today's episode, we're just going to recap the amazing derby performance. All right, let's dive straight into the derby. Where do we even start? It was a fantastic performance from pretty much everyone involved. I don't want to just sit here praising the performance because that'll be pretty boring, but any takeaways from the match? Anything you guys learned in particular? For myself, I was extremely impressed with Thuram and Calhanoglu, and of course Mkhitaryan. But how did you guys feel? What were your takeaways?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that. My takeaways were really the tactical piece. I thought was very interesting. Because at this point, I feel like we've kind of beaten Milan in every way that you could potentially beat a team tactically. There's been times where we played a little bit with the higher line and we've pressed them. Yesterday, we decided to sit really deep. I mean, even before the goal, which did come early, I think it was the 5th or 6th minute. Even before that, ask Pioli, they had the ball for the first 4 minutes, right? They basically were just kind of passing around, and we decided to sit deep and then hit them on the counter, but it worked really well. And I think that the thought process from Inzaghi was most likely that, this Milan team is obviously very athletic. They're very dynamic, so they can certainly beat you in transition, which obviously happened later on with that Leao goal. But if you kind of sit deep and dare them to break you down, I mean, we're talking about this new Milan midfield and how exciting it is, but it's not an extremely creative midfield. They're certainly not adept at necessarily breaking down a low block, and if you sit that deep, you also kind of take away the dynamic pieces that Milan has, because they can't really get in behind you. So I thought it was really smart from Inzaghi, and you have to give him his credit, man, because he seems to always get it right in these big games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you put it perfectly. Against the low block, they weren't really able to build up much momentum or speed. I saw some discussion about Pulisic, which I thought was spot on. He just kept passing it sideways because he had no space to operate behind our low block. They couldn't get runners in behind. If anything, they should have spammed crosses into Giroud, is what I thought, but they didn't for whatever reason. And we reaped the benefits with an early goal. Irfan, what did you think of the performance of Milan's young colossus, Malik Thiaw?
Yeah, it was a rough game for him. I think Thuram just physically dominated him. It's funny because going into the match, so much of the discussion was how young and physical and athletic and fast Milan's team is now compared to the way they used to be. And, we were up for the challenge. It's one of the things that I really like about the way we've been playing against Milan recently is all our players are fired up. Like you see someone like Dumfries who can sometimes be a little passive, and he brings it, like against Theo. And I think you saw Thuram yesterday really just bring it against Dia, and he just physically imposed himself in a way that I think Dia wasn't ready. I don't think he was anticipating that Thuram would be so aggressive. I thought he got kind of taken off guard by it, and obviously it wasn't a great game for him. But Thuram, I think, impressed a lot of people. I mean, the goal by Thuram, I mean, for a player who's gotten so much criticism for the way, he finishes and, his quote unquote number 9 striking center forward abilities. Like, what a goal that was. I mean, it was the first time in a long time where I actually physically jumped out of my seat. And it was just completely incredible the way just everything on that goal, the way he set it up, the way he dribbled for a little bit to open up space, the way he turned his body, and then the placement of that shot. It was unbelievable. So, yeah, Thiago didn't have a great game. I think we were imposing ourselves consistently. And not to get like philosophical or emotional, but yesterday, like throughout, the one thing I kept thinking about was like how amazing it was right now to be an Inter fan. Like, after years and years of just pain, and I'm not taking anything for granted or just getting carried away with one match, but like, from the very beginning, you saw the banners unfold in the San Siro, and you saw like them supporting Hakan with that Turkish flag, the massive Turkish flag there. And then throughout the match, like how excited Thuram was. Mkhitaryan, I mean, I know I've been hard on Mkhitaryan at times, and the fact that he consistently plays 90 minutes and stuff, but man, what a match by him consistently. And like when you read about Mkhitaryan, I think some of the things people don't understand about him or don't know about him as fans is, here's a guy who at 7 years old basically lost his dad to like brain cancer. And, that's tough for any childhood, regardless of how, wealthy or privileged someone might be. And so the trajectory of his life and like the arc of his career, I think, just blossoming at Inter is it's such a great story. And so as a fan yesterday, I was just in amazement throughout of all of our guys and just how awesome they played.
Speaking of Mkhitaryan, obviously a masterful performance. I think we can all agree that he's man of the match. But other than Mkhitaryan, Miko, I want to hear who you thought the next best player was.
I think I would go for Lautaro, which is funny because we scored 5 goals and he didn't score any. But still, I think he was immense there. He was so much involved and like okay, in the first half, I think he lost a few balls in the midfield when he received it from the defense. But other than that, he was like fighting there like so much. I just love that that I can't help it.
Yeah, I think his mentality has just been night and day compared to the player that we initially, came into this team very young, obviously from Argentina. He had to kind of learn how to play with his back to goal. And you saw yesterday, even though obviously he just got back from international duty, I think like about 24 hours before kickoff, I think that's partially the reason why, especially in that first half, he looked a little bit off the pace with his dribbling, which is usually very sharp. But the thing about him is that even when he's not 100% on now, he is so smart and understands our system so well that he's still able to impact the game. And I think you saw that yesterday, even though, like you said, he didn't get on the score sheet. He was still one of our best players. And I think he's definitely a deserved captain of this Inter side. I feel really good knowing that the team is kind of built around him and his mentality.
Did you guys see, by the way, the gestures when Lautaro was asking for the penalty from Çalhanoğlu and he didn't get it?
Yeah.
Which I respect.
Was funny.
Yeah, Çalhanoğlu should take that.
Yeah, and it's funny because Lautaro is the captain and he's asking for the penalty from the other guy. And I like that. I like that. There's still the hierarchy for the penalties.
I mean, Çalhanoğlu is becoming an immense defensive midfielder, which is something I never thought I'd say in my life. When he was like a really crappy attacking midfielder at Milan. So. He deserves all the credit in the world for how he's playing these days. Honestly, I can't think of many in Europe who are putting in as strong performances as he is. And I'm not one to usually get carried away like that. Speaking of getting carried away, with our predictions, as I predicted, we crushed Milan. But Miko, you were closest with your 3-1 prediction. And I think Irfan would have been happy to see Asllani come in as well.
Yes, I was happy with that. I had predicted 2-0. I would have really liked to keep that clean sheet going into game 4, but that's okay. I think the one thing I found interesting about Milan, and I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts, but it's so funny. Like the more things change, the more things stay the same with them. Like We heard about Pulisic. We heard about their midfield. We heard about how young and dynamic and athletic they are. And yet every play, every attacking play from them, every like source of, every threatening advance by them was almost exactly the same as it's always, which is Giroud does some kind of hold up play. He brings in Theo, who's making a run into the box, or, they try to get Leao in space and Leao runs past whoever's defending him on our side. It's just the team. This was always my concern with Milan going into the match too. Like I just don't feel like they're very different than the way they've been for the last couple of years. I think they're still immensely reliant on Leao, and Giroud's hold up play and his like pure center forward play is always really good. But I feel like in a lot of ways they waste him because they use him basically as just like an outlet for people making runs into the box. And so I think that, like you all mentioned, like the low block, I think helped us tactically, but it's just you could have put any other 8 players out there, but everything still kind of flowed through, Leao, Giroud, and Theo.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I struggle to think of a moment in the match that Milan hurt us where Giroud was not involved. It seems like pretty much everything that they did well in the match, because there were a couple of chances, and obviously there was the goal. Everything that they did well, it really went through the feet of Giroud. Anytime that he was able to get space without Acerbi being on his back immediately, all of a sudden there was a dangerous move or action that came from that. So I was curious. I mean, because I think one of the big things coming into this match, and I also posted about it on the forum, was the De Vrij versus Acerbi thing, and I was wondering how you guys felt that kind of played out. I mean, I personally thought that Acerbi was fine. I think you have to give Inzaghi his credit for that. Because when a guy doesn't have any competitive minutes coming into a derby, he obviously makes you a little bit nervous, especially when the guy he's replacing has been part of a defense that let up 0 goals across 3 games. And maybe you guys felt like some of those times where Giroud did get into the match, maybe it was partially because Acerbi was a bit slow to get there, or maybe you just felt that was, that's going to happen over the course of a game. But I personally didn't think that Acerbi had a poor game by any means, and maybe those same things could have happened with De Vrij, certainly. And I also think it's funny that anytime there's a sub and it's Bastoni that comes out, and all of a sudden Acerbi plays 90 minutes, and now he's playing as a left center back, even though he's not very mobile. So I was just curious what you guys thought about Acerbi versus De Vrij in that whole performance.
Yeah, before the game, I was a bit worried, or maybe not worried, but I felt that maybe this is a bit of a risk by Inzaghi. But as we saw, I don't think there was any play that would have gone differently if it was De Vrij and Acerbi there. There was the Leao goal. That was the situation when Giroud got the ball like totally alone, and Acerbi wasn't following him, or that how it looked like in the TV screen. But not sure how it really was. But I don't think De Vrij would have made any difference there. So I think it was at least afterwards saying it was the correct move by Inzaghi to pick Acerbi.
Yeah, it's hard to say at this point that it wasn't justified. I was certainly worried about the move, considering De Vrij had been really good for the first 3 games. He deserves a lot of credit for kind of picking himself up off the floor after effectively being benched by Acerbi last season. A little bit unfortunate, sad for him personally, that he kind of got benched again at the big moment in the season so far. But to his credit, when he came on, he still looked, sharp, professional. Didn't look like he was too upset or anything like that. So that's great. Speaking of subs, how did you guys feel about the performances of Augusto and Fratesi in particular? I think Miko's man, Carlos Augusto, put in a really, really good shift.
Yeah, I think he was good. He looks somehow he looks like a strong guy and like a fast enough, and his shot is really really good. He managed to pull that one.
Yeah, that right-footed shot was surprisingly powerful.
Yeah, maybe it was a bit too center. Otherwise, it could have given more problems to Milan.
He looks big.
Yeah,
he just looks bulky and like physically muscular.
Yeah, not like Fratesi, but almost, because compared to Di Marco, he's like so much more physically imposing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought he looked really good coming in there. I'm interested to see how he'll do once he gets a little bit more time with the team because obviously he missed preseason for the most part. So I think that there's a couple people on the that had some questions about him, but um, I think that he's still 24, so he's pretty young. He hasn't really been playing in Serie A that long to step into this inter team and then step into a derby. Obviously, was a big moment for him, but I thought that he handled it well, and I think that as the season goes along and he just gets more and more comfortable in our system, that he really could be impressive and maybe surprise because yeah, he does have that shot on him, which is something that I recognize from doing my research and watching YouTube videos and things of that nature. He actually does have a really decent right foot on him, even though he's a left-footed player, and he can certainly strike a ball. So I'm interested to see if we can kind of utilize that a bit more as we get him built into the team. But I thought that I'd like to give a special shout out to Arnautovic. I thought that he looked pretty decent when he came on. He's not maybe as strong in the hold-up play as Thuram. Obviously, he lost a couple of those physical battles against Chow. Although I think a couple of those should have been fouls. But one thing I liked that he did in particular was on the Fratesi goal. Him and Lautaro both knew to make that darting run towards the near post, which is what really opened up the lane for Mkhitaryan to make that pass into Fratesi. And obviously, Fratesi takes his goal extremely well. And I guess we can talk about him really quickly as well. I mean, he's had what a week for that guy, right? I mean, he obviously scores twice for Italy and then turns around and then comes into the derby, scores the 5th goal, takes his shirt off, which I loved. I know some people thought it was a stupid yellow card, and of course it is a stupid yellow card, but I mean, let's be honest, we won't remember that yellow card when he gets suspended later on in the year, but we will remember him taking that shirt off and what it kind of meant to him and what it meant really for all of us Inter fans. And I was excited by that. I really like to see it when a player cares that much about a 5th goal in a derby.
He did all the Italian papers are talking about his Totti moment where he
I saw that.
held his finger up to his lips to shush Krunic and then held up his 4 fingers to indicate the scoreline, which was 4-1 at the time. I think this is a good transition into Barella, actually, but at this point, Fratesi might even start chewing into Barella's minutes more so than Mkhitaryan's. How did you guys think about Barella's performance?
Honestly, I thought he was fine. I feel like here's the thing with Barella. I feel like he's under the microscope so much by Inter fans, but then by basically everybody, and the expectations of him day in and day out are so high. And I've heard some discussion about how maybe he hasn't been that great this year and all that sort of stuff. I thought he played really well, and I think he's like the glue in the midfield in that he allows Hakan to do so much of the dirty work defensively and bust up these attacks, and his just engine and making himself available in all of these plays in the midfield, I think is such an important feature in our ability to completely dominate the midfield. And he's different than Mkhitaryan. Mkhitaryan's a lot more kind of dribbling and direct, and he gets into advanced positions. But Barella, I think, has been totally fine. I thought he had a good game yesterday. I thought the entire midfield was really good yesterday. But Fratesi, there's something about that guy. I mean, he has this ability to just find such dangerous positions, just make these attacking runs. Like, it's very different, and he's so direct in that, like, he doesn't try to finesse his way or do, some crazy tactical thing. He's just full speed ahead into the box and making himself available. And there's something about having him, whether he starts or whether he comes off the bench in our midfield that makes us so, I think, dynamic when it comes to our attack. And it's really refreshing to see. I think there's going to be there's a certain X factor with Fratesi that we don't really have in our midfield, and it's really exciting to see.
Not to toot my own horn, but I've been big on Fratesi for a long time. At Sassuolo, he was just doing the same role, essentially running into the box, getting on the end of crosses. He scored twice against us, I think, both connecting from crosses, if I'm not mistaken. He's just clinical in front of goal, and it's really nice to have that reliable input because as much as I love Barella, he's not clinical in front of goal. In fact, he's quite uncomposed in front of goal. I feel there's been plenty of chances over the years, one-on-ones against the keeper or breakaways or chances within the box that have fallen to him that he's lacked that bit of composure at the critical moment and failed to convert. Fratese's the opposite. He seems very, very good in front of goal, going back to his Sassuolo days. I'm a little bit less warm on Barella's performance. I find him, I don't want to put a negative spin on it by saying that he's looking lazy, but he seems almost too relaxed. If you look at the way he plays, if you guys recall, the very first goal of the season was a Dumfries cross into Lautaro, and that came from Barella doing this kind of outside of the boot, hooked over the top ball to Dumfries, which was brilliant. And I see him going for these kinds of plays more regularly these days, but he seems very loose and kind of languid on the ball. He just doesn't seem very agitated as much as he used to be. And maybe this is a good thing, to be honest, if he's more relaxed and more calm. Or I used to be very critical of how he always used to kind of chastise his teammates, and I think, at least in my opinion, go over the top in being very vocal and demonstrative with his exasperation when his teammates, fail to score a chance or get a pass wrong. I thought that was not good for team morale. So it may be a good thing, actually, but I have noticed that he seems a lot calmer, to the point where, again, if I was to put a negative spin on it, it might come across a bit too calm, a bit too lazy. But not sure if anyone else feels that way or has seen the same things I've seen.
For me personally, I actually don't have a problem with Barella's performances. You hear people, I feel like in the Italian media, a lot talk about certainties. That's like a word that I see people use when they talk about certain teams. Like they say Inter has more certainties. I've heard Zanetti kind of use that as well about some of the past Inter teams where, you have these players who you just know are going to give you a certain level of performance. And I feel like that's Barella for us. I feel like he's one of those guys where, he may have kind of an off game from time to time, but if you don't have him in the side, you will 100% miss him. You will notice that the team plays differently. There's just not that same level, that same engine in the midfield. And even yesterday, I thought that he was good in the first half. I thought that he actually set the tone kind of early as well. There was like an early challenge on Teo where he kind of just went through his back,
It was literally 15 seconds into the game. Yeah, it was good.
It was like 15, 30 seconds into the game, something like that. And he immediately goes through his back. But I saw that and I was like, okay, yeah, that means like we're up for this. Like, we're taking this extremely seriously. And I think that, the team looks to players like him because, his level is so high when he's having a great game. And obviously, he is a Ballon d'Or candidate now. So he is one of the best players on this team. And so when you see guys like that bringing that level, I think that it kind of just raises the level of everybody else. So, Barella, maybe he is a little comfortable. Certainly, he probably knows that chances of him getting benched in this Inzaghi team are relatively low. But, he's kind of earned that right, in my opinion. And I still think that he's a massive part of what Inter is going to do this season and really going forward as well. And Fratesi, he may start to give Barella some minutes from time to time. Certainly, it seems like Inzaghi would prefer to rotate those two as opposed to Mkhitaryan. And now after Mkhitaryan's derby performance, he might never rest again. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I think that Barella is going to continue to be obviously a huge part of this team, and I'm fine with his performances thus far.
Mkhitaryan
he's doing fine.
May not rest until 2025 because it seems like we're preparing a new contract for him.
Deserved.
It's hard to argue against that. Just to touch upon what you said about Barella going into the back of Theo 20 seconds into the game, I think my favorite images from the game as a whole was on the replay of the first goal, where you've got Thuram sprinting down the right flank. There was a replay from like the kind of front on view, and Dumfries just shoulders Theo and just sends him rolling.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And could that have been a foul? I mean, that's what the Milan players were complaining about. Maybe I think it would have been soft to give it a foul or to cancel the goal because of that. But that was just, I enjoyed that so much.
Sorry, did you guys think it was a foul on Chow? I'm curious to know. Did you guys? I mean, if that was somebody
Absolutely not.
You
He
don't
went
think
down
so? Okay.
super easy, looking to get the foul, kind of like Bastoni does when he gets pressured. But Bastoni's far smarter than Chiao in those situations. Chiao went down, way too easily, looking for that.
And Thuram did a really good job of making it very clear that he wasn't doing anything. You know, it was like
he had his hands up,
even-
and like
yeah, he has his hands up. He hesitated a little bit before like actually pushing through Thiago when he was on the floor. Like he did a good job of that discipline. But you know, it's interesting. Like I noticed the same things you guys are talking about. Don't you just feel though, like when you watch our guys play, that they just know that Scudetto they lost to Milan was total BS and they should not have lost it. And like every time since then, really, that they've come out, they've just been so fired up and just so pissed off. And like even people who are like pretty demonstrably not aggressive, like someone like Dumfries, right? He's up for it when he plays against Milan and Barella and everybody. They just have. I mean, I know it's a derby. I know there's history there. There are city rivals and all that sort of stuff. But at least recently, right? Like we've also had this like mental and physical edge, that determination that like we're not going to beat these guys. We're going to like try to destroy these guys. And obviously, it doesn't end up happening at times, but we've dominated them now in a way, like 5 wins in a row. That hasn't really happened in the history of this fixture. And you know, even when you look at the scoreline yesterday, like the 5-1 is a little misleading in the sense that when Leao scored that goal, it was 2-1 for you know another 12, 13, 14 minutes, and it was kind of cagey for a while. But you know, it's hard to say that we didn't like. We were just ready. We're ready. We're fired up. Like the way these guys play against Milan, it's honestly just so awesome to see as a fan. Like they're up for it. They're ready. They don't shrink away, you know, from a mental standpoint at all.
Well, that's the thing that makes me the most happy, that we finally really, really put them to the sword here. I'm a bit of an extremist in like against Milan. You know, it's not enough to beat them. We want to crush them. And for me, I guess I look at the long game or the bigger picture here as well, which is to kind of build that mental superiority. I feel like despite beating them 5 times in a row, I honestly felt like some of the scorelines were flattering to Milan, especially that 1-0 game and that 2-0 game. We could have won those games 3-0 each. And, you know, I remember thinking to myself, you know, 2-0 is enough. Let's go for a third. And in the second leg, where they inexplicably lined up in a 3-5-2 to mirror our formation, they did nothing for the first half, literally nothing. And we should have taken more advantage. And the reason I get kind of like, dare I say, greedy about these kinds of things is I think in the long game, they matter. And the analogy that I always point to here is Juventus and the kind of mental superiority they held over us for so long. Obviously, that was exacerbated by the advantages they gained from their systematic corruption, but we won't go there because we'll be talking all day. But when they came back to Serie A after spending a season in Serie B, we looked worried. You know what I mean? It felt like, oh shit, the big bad boss is back now.
We still do, don't we? We still feel like that, man.
Sometimes, but it felt very much the case when they first came back from Serie B. And even though they finished 7th for 2 years in a row before Conte took over, even with Mourinho, we had trouble beating them. I think we only beat them once in the league in those 2 or 3 seasons. And then obviously, during the Conte and Allegri years, we pretty much never beat them. But that's the kind of clear mental stranglehold they had on us for a long time. And that's the kind of trauma that I would like us to inflict upon Milan, or that I wanted us to inflict upon Milan for the years that we had this superiority. And the most gratifying thing for me last night was that this was the biggest step in that direction. This was the biggest show of force. It wasn't just a beating. It was a real beatdown. It was a humiliation. And so, yeah, for me, that's easily the highlight of this entire 5 in a row streak.
Yeah, and it's really interesting now, I think, for Milan, because obviously it's only the 4th match day, so nothing is necessarily decisive. But you kind of have to wonder where do they go from here. because even with the new signings, they obviously they can't beat us. It's worse. we made it even worse than it was when they had a worse midfield theoretically, right? This was supposed to be billed as, oh, this is a new look Milan with these players that are going to be a difference makers, and obviously that didn't really prove to be the case. So obviously this will be a mental hit on them. One thing I will say about this Milan side is that they have kind of bounced back in prior times from some of the beatdowns that we've given them. So I'll be interested to see if they do that again. They obviously have, I believe, Newcastle in the midweek for Champions League. So I'm curious to see mentally if this does have an effect on Milan and if they start to drop a couple of points here and there, or if they bounce right back.
Miko, your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to get back to that 2-1 goal. As was mentioned, that it was only a 2-1 situation, but or the score was 2-1. But I was just looking back at that. I skimmed through the match before this podcast, and I didn't see anything from Milan other than maybe one counter attack, and they had like nothing. They couldn't create anything. They didn't get any momentum from that 2-1 goal, and I think it comes down to the fact that Inter is simply so much better. We are like so much more composed, and it comes to my second point that Inzaghi is absolutely schooling Pioli in this year. Like they scored one goal in 5 games. It's like, what? How is it even possible to like not get more goals than one? And we are like scoring for fun.
I saw a really funny screenshot. It was the first half stats, and interestingly enough, we had 2 goals at I think 0.8 xG, but Milan had 78 possession, like 70-something% possession, and they had 0.03 xG.
Yeah, it's exactly that. We managed to control the game without the ball so well, like we discussed about the Fiorentina match. And even though Milan had a bit more dangerous possession in the first half, I think, but still there was like this one Theo run to the box, and that was it basically.
I remember that. But Jay, we can't let Jay off the hook here. As the resident Milan fan here, what happened? Diagnose Milan's performance and their shortcomings here, so we all understand what happened here on the Milan side.
Look, for the first 4 minutes, Milan had the ball only. Inter couldn't touch him in the first 4 minutes.
Thanks, Pioli.
To quote a great man.
Look, but yeah,
go on, Mika.
Didn't he use that same almost the same quote?
Yeah. They were in control for the first 11 minutes or something like that. Like I said before the match, that it was going to go one of 2 ways. One was we're going to pass our way through them, like we had in the previous derbies, or their new look, fitter and more physical team would make that a lot more difficult. Turns out it didn't. And not to overreact over one game, but I think this game really highlighted a lot of holes in their squad. Krunic is not a DM. Reinders and Loftus-Cheek might be stronger than like a Tonali or Benessa, but as one of you guys pointed out earlier, they're not great on the ball either. So they're going to have difficulty breaking down teams that play like a low block, or any teams that can defend with organization, really. So there's a lack of creativity there. And Loftus-Cheek has horrendous fitness issues anyway. But the biggest thing for them is that they didn't buy a starting centre-back, right? And it's like similar to how we were screaming out for a top-quality defender, back when we were linked to the likes of fucking Balogun and Scamacca and stuff. Even going that far back, we were saying, I'm worried about the defense, man. I don't want to rely on Acerbi and Damian, whatever, for another year. To their credit, they're still holding it together, but we at least took that big leap with spending 30 million on Pavard. That's what they needed to do Chiao had some encouraging performances towards the end of last season, and it's easy to get carried away when a young guy puts in, some good performances here and there. But what ended up happening is they effectively entrusted a starting position to him, and you're starting to see why he's considered talented but still extremely raw and unpolished. Don't forget, this is a guy who joined from relegated Schalke. He was brutally exposed, lack of experience, lack of smarts, lack of just general, his overall defensive skill was exposed there. Their starting defense is Tomori and Thiaw. That's, I would be worried if I was a Milan fan. And their backups are Kier, who is now 35 or something, and even though Acerbi's 35, I think, we can see who's kind of aged more gracefully. Kalulu seems to be a one-hit wonder or a one-season wonder. Unfortunately, that one season where he played well ended up winning them the Scudetto. But since then, I think even most Milan fans would unanimously agree he's been very poor since then. And that's it. Like, they needed to buy a starting defender.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that they should have spent probably some more money on that back line. Because do you really need a backup right winger like a Chuck Weze more than you needed a real good center back? Because if you look at a guy like Chiao, young guy like you said from a relegated Schalke team, 22 years old. If that guy was in this Inter side, he would basically be like Bisek.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't be getting a lot of time. He'd be maybe a good rotation guy for us, but for them, obviously he's playing a ton of minutes. And so, that's going to be I think a real concern for them over the course of 38 games, especially because I think we kind of gave a lot of teams in the league the blueprint for how to play against this Milan side. If you sit deep there, it's going to be very hard for them to break you down because they don't have a lot of creativity in the midfield, and you take the dynamic players away from them. And then, you have a really inexperienced guy at center back. And especially, Tomori will come back into that side, but I've never been really blown away by
I don't rate Tomori
either.
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The more I look at the Milan squad, the more I feel like they've got glaring holes in their squad. The Okafor signing is, if you want to look at it optimistically, it gives them like a forward who's, who can move around the pitch a lot and not, be as static as a Giroud. But obviously, as we all know, if you kind of sacrifice a number 9 for a guy who kind of goes walkabout, my sort of Australian term there for you, you lose that kind of positional reference, to build your attacks off. As Sterling mentioned, Milan didn't have any dangerous moves or moments last night which didn't involve Giroud. And so you put an Okafor there instead of Giroud. Is it going to look any better? Probably not.
No.
So they need a number 9. That Luca Romero kid they took from Lazio is talented, but he's only 18. Probably a bit too green to entrust as like the anchor in midfield. Yeah, they'll get Benessa back, but even if they had Benessa, I don't feel like he's necessarily the best DM/anchor for them either. And then, as we mentioned, those issues that they have in defense, and don't forget their captain Calabria is, I think even Milan fans are pretty divided on him. I think a lot of them really strongly don't care for him as a footballer.
Yeah, I think you're spot on as well, Jay, about them needing a number 9, because I know that they were obviously linked late in the window to Taremi. And I think that if Taremi could have came in, that would have been a huge difference maker potentially for Milan. I even said that I think that they would have been actually in the Scudetto battle if they could have gotten Taremi's deal across the finish line. Because I know, obviously there's questions about the quality of that player. I personally think that he is a really good player, but I think that what you're saying is spot on, where they needed another reference point in that team. And Giroud, I think Giroud's obviously a very good player, but he's also getting up there in age. So trying to really rely on him as your lone center forward over a long season, I think could potentially cause some issues as you kind of get into those winter months and the season kind of gets long and you have games every 3 days. And maybe Okafor can potentially be that guy. I don't know. I think he's brought in partially because he can play multiple positions across the front line, but if you do end up playing Okafor, you have to completely change the way that you play.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to be a big hold-up guy the way that a Giroux is, or the way that maybe a Taremi could have been for them. So really then you have essentially 3 guys up front who are really going to be trying to get in behind and try and run and gun. So that can work in certain games. Maybe it'll even be better for them, maybe like a Champions League where teams are not going to necessarily sit deep. But I think that they missed out by not getting that Taremi deal across the finish line. And really, Luka Jovic is who they ended up bringing in. And that guy hasn't been a serious footballer in like 2 years. So I don't think he's going to do too much over there.
Yeah.
I saw that he actually played yesterday, and I had no idea.
Exactly.
He came off the bench for some Gagliardini time.
Yeah. No, but with Milan, honestly, I look, I'm not trying to be insulting or anything like that, but there's a level of like, favorite team goggles that you need to think that a Reindeers, Krunic, and Loftus-Cheek midfield is going to give, probably one of the top 5 midfields in the world issues. It's just, look, Loftus-Cheek is not good enough. He's not good enough.
Yeah.
He's just not.
Yeah.
And Reindeers, I think, has potential, but he's not a finished product. And Krunic, like we mentioned, is also just not that great. Benacer is going to help them probably more than most of the players that they don't have available right now coming back. But the midfield, as young and dynamic and athletic and fast as they might be, it's not a good enough midfield to compete at, the kind of levels that I think some of their fans think that they have ambition on competing. They're just not. And look, I've downplayed Tonali quite a bit. I think, his best attribute is his shoving ability.
Two-handed shoving ability.
Yeah,
but he's a talented player for their midfield that they lost. And honestly, you looking at their midfield now, I don't think you can say that their midfield right now is better than it was last year when they had a healthy Benacer for some time and Tonali. Just don't see it.
I was gonna point out that Sterling made a good point about the Milan midfield and how we took away the advantage they could have had by like playing very deep and sit there and wait for them, because they couldn't do anything with the ball, or mostly anything with the ball. The midfielders, it was like discussed before, it was Giroux creating everything for them in this derby, and I think other coaches will take notes from this match, how you stop Milan. Just sit deep and let them try to do something and then hit at the break. That's how it looks.
Okay.
How you can beat them.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next match, which is Wednesday night, European time. We're playing away, right? At Sociedad.
Yeah.
Let me start with this question. Who is one player who didn't start the derby that you would lock in for a starting spot today? I'll start with you, Irfan. Who do you want?
I'd like to see Pavard. It's about time that he plays and gets some time and it gets a start. I'd like to see him play. He'd be my choice. Just, I don't anticipate Real Sociedad to be an immensely difficult game. They're a tricky team. But, I think it'd be interesting to see him play. But as I'm saying it, I'm starting to think it's probably not going to be the case, because I just don't feel like Inzaghi is going to kind of gamble in that sense. But let's see.
Is that anything to do with Darmian perhaps having a slightly off game, or is it just because he's, our main signing?
No, I think it's because he's our main signing. He's a player I've been super excited about getting. I think Darmian was fine. Leao's going to make a lot of people look like that. You just have to prevent any type of one-on-ones with him. So I don't hold that against Darmian. I think it's more about me just wanting to see Pavard in action, a player that we spent a lot of money on, a player that I've been wanting since the beginning of the transfer window. So it'd be nice to just see some extended play from him.
Fair enough. Sterling.
Yeah, so I think the obvious answer is Pavard, as Irfan said. However, I think Irfan was also correct in saying that I don't know if we're actually going to see him, at least from the start. This is a really important fixture away at Sociedad to start off our Champions League campaign. We really need to get the 3 points or a minimum a draw here, because this is like a deceptively tricky group where, you have two really good teams in Benfica and Real Sociedad, which, I think over the course of the group stage, we should be able to come through. But I think that you really want to start your Champions League campaign off on the right foot, because you don't want to get behind the 8 ball and then have to scramble later on in the group stage to try and earn points. So I wouldn't be surprised if Inzaghi decides not to rotate much. Maybe you'll see one person change from our lineup, or maybe two, but I don't think you're going to see the type of rotations that we saw, like, towards the end of last season, where it seemed like you were just playing two different 11s. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe De Vrij came back in, or maybe even Fratesi gets to start, or maybe Pavard, but I don't think you're going to see all of those guys at once. I think you'll probably see either or, just because, knowing Inzaghi, he's a conservative guy, and I mean he knows his team. And I believe that the next Serie A game, I believe, is against Empoli. And so I feel like that's probably where we'll see a little bit more rotation, but I don't really see him rotating a ton going into this Sociedad fixture, because I agree it's a really important game. But yeah, if I could choose one player to see, it would definitely be Pavard.
Very good. Miko?
Yeah, nothing to add, basically. I agree that I don't see too many changes coming, because it's the Champions League starting game and it's an away fixture, so we wanna have it like keep going like we've been doing now. So I don't see Inzaghi changing much, but I think Pavard is the one who can be thrown into the starting lineup to a Champions League game just like that, because he's like he has probably the best pedigree. He's like a most experienced winner in this squad, so I think he will do fine. He's been training
Jay,
with the team for
after
Yeah.
Aslani, who would you like to see, Jay, play 90 minutes again?
I was actually going to say Claessens. I keep calling him Claessens. There's no S at the end of his name. It's just Klaassen. I think it's like a throwaway. I think it's like some leftover trauma from Gosens, who scored again, by the way. Another towering header.
But they lost. They lost.
They did, unfortunately. But no, I was going to say Claessens, kind of half seriously, half jokingly. The reason for that is Mkhitaryan's importance to this team cannot be understated, and so that kind of puts me at a fork in the road, where on one hand, because he is so important, we need to use him for this game. On the other hand, because he is so important, we could do with not running him into the ground, considering he is 35, 34. Well, that's what I was thinking about when I was thinking of Klaassen. But yeah, it has to be Pavard, of course, or Fratesi maybe. But other than that, there's not much variation needed, I think. I think it's important for these big teams to be able to handle these quick fire series of games. You know what I mean? It's, if anything, a bit cowardly if the coach worries too much about his team getting fatigued or suspended and all this kind of stuff, and starts rotating, out of fear of that. Obviously, there's the whole fitness element that we don't get to see, or that we're not privy to behind the scenes. But, the example I always point to is that Scudetto run that we had under Conte, where I think it was like Skriniar, Barella, Brozovic, and Bastoni all were one yellow card away from suspension for like 3 months, but Conte just played them 90 minutes every game, you know what I mean? For like 3 months in a row.
Yeah.
And like that's what winners do. That's what winning coaches get out of winning players. I think we're seeing Inzaghi kind of develop a bit more of that. I'm seeing less fearfulness from him, at least at the start of this season, which I really appreciate. And it's really winning me over as well. So yeah, I think minimal rotation for this game will be good. As it happens, Sociedad play in 6 hours from now, I think. And they are playing against Real Madrid. So hopefully they get demolished, because they're unbeaten so far. 1 win and 3 draws, sitting in 11th place. But I am a bit wary. I do think this could, if we take this opportunity to transition into predictions, I think this could be like a 1-1 draw. I think we historically struggle against Spanish teams. As mentioned, we'll have the advantage of an extra day's rest, but I don't think this will be an easy game. I think it will be low scoring, pretty cagey, and we might come out on top, but I do think there's a chance of a draw here. What do you guys think? Let's go with Sterling.
Yeah, I was going to go with 1-0 as the prediction, with Inter being the winner in that match. I think that if you want me to predict the goal, I'm going to say it's going to come from Denzel Dumfries. So I'm predicting Dumfries to continue his really good form, maybe a back post header from a DeMarco cross or something along those lines. But yeah, I'm expecting it to be a fairly difficult match. And like you said, we always seem to struggle against Spanish teams for whatever reason. So I see us maybe getting a goal and then kind of holding on at the end, but maybe just squeaking it out and getting away with a 1-0.
Yeah, I'm gonna say a 2-1 win. I think we're due for like some unfortunate random type goal, whether it's like a deflected goal or some kind of penalty or some BS like that. So I'll give them a goal, but I think we'll be able to pull it out. One quick question though, before we get to Miko and Jay's Jay already predicted, but before we get to Miko's prediction, what on earth? What's the status of Alexis Sanchez? Like, is he available? Is he medically fit? Is he around? Like, I haven't heard much about what's going on with Sanchez.
He played the international break.
Yeah. He played like 90 minutes there, and he was on the bench. Okay. Yeah, yesterday he was on the bench. Yeah,
he was on the bench, but he was also suspiciously absent from the screen. I did not see him for a second. Yeah. I even saw Bissek, and look, I even saw Agume on the screen for like a good 10 seconds. I didn't see Sanchez once, so
I did see him during a goal celebration. He popped up really briefly.
I was suspicious that we just put his name on the team sheet to make it seem like he was available when in reality he's not. So I have no answer to that question, but apparently he's available.
Yeah, but yeah, I was about to say also 1-2 win for us. I think we are so mature at this point, and we are like on a good run that we will grab wins against these type of teams which are clearly at lower level. I feel like Sociedad is a lower level even if they are in Champions League. I believe, did they had David Silva last season?
Yeah, and he retired, I think.
Yeah, so I think that affects their performance a lot. That's how I feel. But
they have Kubo now.
Okay. Never heard that name. But yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not well prepared for these Real Sociedad questions. But yeah, that's my prediction for this match. The Real Madrid away game doesn't help them at that. For this one.
It is interesting that they decided to have the match late on a Sunday before they go into a Champions League. Usually teams that play in Champions League, and both of those are Champions League teams this year, you would think they would have played the match, at least a day earlier. So I think that's interesting. And I think it will actually have an impact on our match. And so hopefully they're a little bit more tired, but weird scheduling from La Liga there.
Yeah. Aren't things going too well fast though? Like everything's so nice right now. Aren't we just due for a classic, momentary slip into Crisis Inter, even just for like one game,
Yeah, when do we play Sassuolo?
Down two
games where it's like you're watching someone walking, and then all of a sudden they just slip, just for like a second. They lose their balance just for a second. Are we due for one of those moments?
Well, not
it's a little early still. I think maybe that moment's going to come, certainly at some point. But I feel like we're still in a really, really good moment right now. I don't see us having too much of a slip up until whenever we play Juventus. That's when the crisis will start.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's an away match, the first one.
Against Juventus?
Yeah, but it's like in over a month or something.
Look, I'll tell you what. If this was 15-year-old Jay playing Pro Evolution Soccer Master League, I would play Sommer, Pavard, De Vrij, Bastoni, Dumfries, Fratesi, Aslani, Klaassen, Augusto, Thuram, and Arnautovic. But thankfully, I'm no longer 15 years old. Okay, so yeah, look, I think, like I said, I think it'll be cagey. I think 1-1 or maybe a 1-0 or maybe even a 0-0. I think all of us have predicted, less than not over 3 goals, combined. So and all margins within a 1-goal margin. So I think we all agree it's going to be cagey. I think we all acknowledge that Spanish teams just seem to do well against us, and also just in Europe in general, Spanish teams have inordinately good track records against other teams. So it won't be an easy game. But, this team surprises me sometimes. So I'm hoping for a pleasant surprise where we, again, kind of show our strength. I think now's a perfect time for us to continue showing our strength after that demolition yesterday.
What do you guys think about the striker rotation? Should we do that now or?
I don't think so. I think you leave Thuram and Lautaro there, at least for this game. And then I think you do the rotation against Empoli. I think you bring Arnautovic in to start that game, probably next to Lautaro, but even next or next to Thuram, either one. But I think that for this game, you go with what's been working.
Agreed. I'm just the whole striker situation. Like I said previously, it's a little bit of a sensitive issue for me. I'm just a little bit frightened of having a 35-year-old and a 35-year-old on the bench. That's 2 striking options.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the one thing. Obviously, I wasn't able to come on and talk about the Mercato and things of that nature, but that has been one of my primary concerns. There's 2 positions in the squad where I have that concern. One of them is central center back, where we have obviously Iturbi and De Vrij, and then we have center forward where you have Arnautovic and Sanchez, where you're relying on some really old bodies to have really good seasons. And sometimes that's going to happen, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes when it comes down to when you're 34, 35, 36, you can be good enough today and not good enough tomorrow. It's shocking sometimes how quickly the switch can flip and you're just all of a sudden not dynamic enough. I think we saw that with Dzeko, for example, where his mind knew what to do. He still had technical quality, but physically, at times it was just really a struggle for him. So I do have those concerns about certain positions in the squad and whether or not we could, at some point, potentially get found out. But the good thing is that we do have a good mix, I would say, across the squad in terms of age. But hopefully we hold on for one more season. We'll see.
Yeah, this is one of those moments where it's so important to realize how important. It's nice to see how well Thuram has adjusted, because if he had even some, if he was slow out the gate or if he had some issues making his way into the starting position, then we know Inzaghi's instincts are to go with the more experienced hand, and we could have run the risk, especially after his debut, of Inzaghi starting Arnautovic with Thuram and doing to Arnautovic what he ended up essentially doing to Dzeko, which is a player who was brought in to be like the third striker, ends up basically playing 90 minutes a game and playing 2 times a week and all that sort of stuff. So honestly, I feel like some of the fears I had have been abated a little bit by Thuram adjusting so well, playing so well with Lautaro, and not just his goals, which have finally come, but also just his overall play and link up has been so good that luckily, hopefully we'll just continue to rely on Arnautovic and Sanchez to just play a few minutes here and there and not, tangible starting minutes, because I don't think that would go over so well with their ages and their injury histories.
You can't play them together. That's a really big issue for me. I mean, there's not many situations where you should have to play them together, but you can't not have one of Lautaro or Thuram on the pitch. Sanchez and Arnautovic playing together is just nightmare fuel for me. And it means that our rotation options are limited unless you want to really go back in time and start playing like Mkhitaryan and Cuadrado off front. But let's not go there.
Yeah, and Arnautovic did say he's not a backup, so he wants that position. So I don't know if you saw that. You guys saw that interview that he had during the international break after he scored his brace. He basically said, I didn't come here to be a backup player, and I'm going to fight for my starting spot. But that's what you want, right? I mean, you want a guy who's going to be pushing to get into the team. You don't want someone who's too complacent. And, at some point, they are going to play together. Sanchez and Arnautovic are going to start a match at some point later on in this season. Maybe it'll be when we're a little bit more comfortable in the league, or maybe it'll be in a Coppa Italia fixture, something along those lines. But with the rotation, the way that we were rotating towards the end of last season, at some point I think that you will see those two starting a match together. They probably they're not going to finish the 90 minutes together, but I actually think that they'll be fine. It really just comes down to how often we have to see it. But if we have to see it for 60 minutes for the third match in a week, I'm not that nervous about it, depending on who the opponent is. I think that one thing that they do understand is they know how to play this game. That's why you get experienced players, because that they're going to bring a certain level. And so if they're just, having to trot out, once every couple of weeks towards the back end of the season to start together, I think they can give us 60 good minutes. I think we'll be okay with that. But the injuries is really what's more so a concern for me.
Yeah, hopefully they start against some, relegation teams like Empoli and Roma. So
exactly.
I will say one of the things that's so refreshing about this season, and I do think it's a big part of why we've been successful so far, is that we've kind of saved Inzaghi from himself in a certain way. Like just him making substitutions now, and I don't have to see Gagliardini or Dzeko trying to come onto the pitch while other options are still on the bench or they're replacing other players. Like, now I usually don't cringe like when he makes subs, because almost all the players that he would bring on, I'm like okay with. Like, it's kind of nice to see, Augusto get some minutes, Frattesi get minutes, even Quadrado, and obviously my boy Aslani. Like, it's nice to see him go to the bench and me not just like cowering in shame at what's happening.
Yeah.
So
someone made a really good point, which was that someone made a really good point, which was that our unused subs from the derby yesterday include Sensi, Quadrado, Klaassen, Pavard, and Sanchez. That's impressive. That's good to see. So the rotation options do seem a bit better, even if we did lose some, established quality like Brozovic and Skriniar. But the team feels more even. The backups are certainly better, even if we did lose some big names. Shall we move on to Empoli? There's probably not a whole lot to predict, considering it's 2 games ahead. But Empoli are currently 20th in the league, one of the favourites to go down. Do we expect much issue with Empoli? They haven't even scored a goal yet.
I just checked: 0 goals scored and 5 conceded.
Yeah, then they're playing against Roma, so they should win.
Yeah, this is actually relegation battle.
Exactly. Yeah. Against Juventus, they had 0 shots on goal, and I mean, it's a tough run for them. Juventus, Roma, and then Inter in a row. So, hopefully we don't make this any more complicated than it needs to be. The only issue is that it's away, but at this point we should be mature enough to handle an away trip to the 20th ranked team in the league. Any early predictions or wishes in terms of rotation? How about you, Irfan?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on, I guess, what we see in the Champions League fixture. But yeah, if you were ever gonna give someone like Quadrado or Augusto a start, and maybe change things up a little bit in the midfield, with a start for Frattesi or something, I think you'll see it against Empoli. I still don't think you'll see like some wholesale rotation going on, but I think you might see one piece or two come in. It should be an easy fixture. I don't think it'll be some kind of blowout, though. The way we've been playing, who knows? But I could see a pretty comfortable 2-0 or 3-0 win against these guys. They really struggle to score, and I don't see them giving us a lot of issues.
Agreed. Agume, anyone?
I would love to see that. I'm actually like an Agume fan. I would love to see him try it out in that deep position as a backup to Çalhanoğlu, or an alternative backup, I guess, to Çalhanoğlu for Asllani, because I think that he actually gives a little bit more of a physical presence. But anyways, we don't need to go down that road, because that's never going to happen. He should go on loan to Turkey or anywhere at this point. Saudi Arabia, anywhere that he can go right now just to get minutes, he needs to take that option. Just to move on to the Empoli match. This is the type of match that would have terrified me in the past. Because away at the 20th place team is like classic Inter meltdown time. Yep. Where all of a sudden they start scoring worldies and Handanovic is a frozen piece of pizza in the goal. But I don't
wearing a cap because it's a daytime game.
Exactly. It'll be 6 a.m. My time. I'll wake up and I'll see Handanovic with a hat on, and I'll just go back to bed. But no, this is this should be a pretty easy one, I think, for us. I'm thinking probably a 2 or 3-0 game, and hopefully we will be able to do a little bit of rotation. As was mentioned, I don't see us swapping out the 11, nor do I think we should this early in the season. But I think that some of those guys who have been on the fringe, who I think deserve some minutes, guys like Arnautovic, guys like Fratesi, hopefully that'll be a good opportunity for them to show why Inter decided to bet on them in the first place.
I know my man Miko is rooting for his man Carlos Augusto to get a start here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I want to see Augusto start, and maybe, as said, Cuadrado as well. And probably, if predicted right that Thuram and Lautaro will start against Sociedad, then we will see, I don't know, maybe Arnautovic getting a start against Empoli. I think that would be fine. Maybe with Lautaro. Lautaro is so essential for the team that I don't think he's gonna get benched too often. Even though, I don't know, I feel like his playing style is something that it should require some rest at some point. He can't play like this type of minutes twice a week. But let's see. It's interesting to see how his rotation will be handled in the future. But yeah,
that he's captain as well.
Actually, yeah. I was actually thinking that will it affect it even more that he won't be dropped? But
absolutely, my opinion. I mean, last season I think the season before, I was looking through the stats, and there was only like 2 games in the entire season that Lautaro played a full 90 minutes, whereas this season I think he's played 90 in most games already. So that's obviously to do with him being the main man and not Lukaku anymore, but also to do with the fact that he's captain. I think Lautaro has to start this game, even if he plays 90 minutes against Sociedad. For one, Lautaro has had drops in form in the past and these, long droughts and whatever, but none of it really struck me as being fitness related. I never felt like he's exhausted, he needs a rest. I've thought that about Barella in the past, but not Lautaro. He's one of those guys who, as you said, on one hand, that combative style of his almost needs rest, but it's also something that's very difficult to sacrifice, even to rest him. Like, as Sterling mentioned, this is a potential banana skin game, or it would have been for a banter era. If this was 2016, I'd be saying 1-0 Empoli 100%. But this is one of those games that has the potential for an upset, because it's just, classic Inter against the 20th place team. What could go wrong, And I think having that kind of ragged striker who can score these, dog shit goals out of nowhere is essential. So Lautaro can provide that. So assuming obviously no injuries or any major issues, he needs to start against Sociedad and against Empoli. He should be at this point pretty much undroppable because of the way he plays, because of what he brings to our team, and also, the fact that he's our captain now. He needs to be well embedded.
Like Miko mentioned, even though he didn't get on the score sheet against Milan, he was massive for us. And it's interesting to see, we don't track this in football the way we do in like hockey, but the hockey assists that he has also, where he's the second pass before the goal. He's been doing that so well this season, like just like holding up the ball and then just dropping a dime to like somebody who's running into space, which really just like opens up that defense. And I don't know, it's really impressive to see how he's blossomed into that kind of even playmaking role. Like the vision he has as a center forward, I think is really, really impressive.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I just checked that that his injury record is actually pretty good. He's missed like 13 games, 13 games in his inter career, and it's been like six seasons now. Or
yeah, exactly. He's very rarely injured. When he does get injured, they're usually very small, minor injuries, which only force him out for a game or two. If anything, he's probably missed more games through suspension than injury. But he's coming along leaps and bounds. His finishing seems to be more composed. He keeps his eye on the ball instead of sliding in and hacking at it like a child. His awareness is improving. His maturity is improving. So there have been many times over the last few years where I thought I saw something along the lines of this kind of development, only for him to plunge into a 5-month drought. But I think this time it might be for real.
Yeah, I think the encapsulation of who he's turned into for this team is, if you look at the Thuram goal from yesterday, the ball comes into Lautaro at basically the bottom of the center circle, and he hits a one-time no-look pass behind the Milan backline into Dumfries, who's already on his horse. I mean, that's just knowing your teammates, knowing your system, and then having the actual technical quality to execute. And obviously, Thuram still has a lot to do, but he can't do that if Lautaro doesn't do what he does first, right? So again, that's the hockey assist that Irfan was talking about there, where he's the one who really is the brain of the offense now in a way, and he's the one who starts so many of our attacks with those long switching passes. And he is undroppable, essentially. I am curious to see how we'll play in those times when we do start a match without him, but every important game he has to play.
One quick thing before we finish.
Please.
Can anyone tell me what position Sevilla is in the Spanish league?
I think they are 20th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They are 20th.
Which means they're going to win the Europa League again.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be playing the Champions League from Segunda at this rate. They are 20th in the table with 0 wins in 3 games, and long may that continue.
Yes, there we go. Thank you for that.
All right, well, let's wrap up there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sterling.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
See you guys.
Anytime.
Thank you.